On Saturday, April 18th, just 10 days before announcing that he was running for president in the Democratic primary, across the border from his home state of Vermont, Bernie Sanders laid out his vision for the country to a packed house in Raymond, New Hampshire.
Let me begin by telling everybody in this room what you already know. And that is that our country today faces a huge set of enormous problems. That's just a simple fact. And in fact, I think if you combine the economic problems that we're facing and the healthcare problems that we're facing, infrastructure problems that we're facing, you add climate change to it, where the scientists tell us that the future of the planet is being threatened. Add all those things together, we probably have more serious problems than any time since the Great Depression. And one of the major problems that we have in the midst of all of these serious problems is we don't discuss these problems. Unfortunately, a lot of what politics is about, a lot of what media is about, is a deflection away from the real issues facing our country. So what I want to talk about a little bit today is what some of those issues are and how I think we can move forward as a nation. And let me begin by saying that I believe if we are going to leave our kids and our grandchildren a nation which is habitable, a nation which is decent, we need a political revolution in this country. Yeah. Yes. Yes. What do I mean by that? Let me tell you what I mean by that. What I mean by that is that it is not acceptable that when we have elections, as we did last November, that 63% of the American people don't vote. It is not acceptable that 80% of the American people don't vote. It is not acceptable that poll after poll tells us that the American people know very little about what's going on in the nation's capital. It is not acceptable that probably until the last few days, major television networks spent virtually no time at all, zero, discussing the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the largest trade agreement in the history of this country. And that media does not think it's important to discuss the issues facing the American people with the American people. So what I mean by a political revolution is that it's cultural. It says that as citizens of a democracy, which is a pretty big deal, we must actively participate in the political process. We must be thinking about the important issues, and we must do everything that we can to make this country better and to address the very serious problems that we face. You know, I'm not asking people to spend more time talking about trade and economics than they do about football. That would be too radical. But, you know, maybe a fraction of the time where we sit down and say, okay, how does it happen that despite a huge increase in technology and productivity, the average American today is working longer hours for low wages? Is that a good question? Yes. Now, people may disagree with or argue about why that's so, but we have seen in the last 30, 40 years a huge explosion of technology. Every worker out there is more productive than he or she used to be, and yet millions and millions of workers are working longer hours for low wages. We are seeing right now median family income, that family right in the middle of the American economy, is earning about $5,000 less than the family earned in 1999. How does that happen? Why? We are seeing male workers making many, many hundreds of dollars less in inflation adjusted for dollars than they used to. Women workers making less. How does that happen? Those are issues that we have got to talk about. And the other issue that we really have got to talk about, put at the top of the agenda, is this issue of income and wealth inequality. Now let me tell you about that issue, because this is not just a moral issue, in the sense that we have to ask whether we are content in living in a nation when so few have so much and so many have so little. That's the moral issue. And I think most of us are not. But it is also an economic issue, Because you're not going to create the millions of jobs we desperately need unless you have disposable income in the hands of working people who are going out buying goods and services. And you don't have that when so few have so much and so many have so little.
Right, Senator Sanders, thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you, sir. An observation here, and unfortunately I'm part of this demographic now as well, but you're missing a lot of young people. And because they're, you know, mired in their Facebook or whatever, but also because probably they've given up. And when you talk about everything you talk about, it's almost as if not only have they given up, but when you talk about the CEOs and the politicians, they've given up on this country. What they see is a China and India and 3 billion people who don't even have a washing machine or a toilet, and the money and the dollars there. And they say, well, you know, who cares about this country? And I don't know how you turn that around. Because there's no loyalty, there's no care. They just see other places, and as far as, you know, people having jobs and being able to earn a living, who cares?
I think your point is a very good point. And the point is that many of these multinational corporations could care less about the people of the United States of America.
That's right. Yeah.
And what they have shown us in recent years is not only their willingness to shut down thousands and thousands of plants in New Hampshire, in Vermont, and all over this country and move abroad, they have also shown us that given the opportunity, they will do everything they can not to pay a nickel in taxes in this country. Yeah. We have just published a report that came out recently. Major corporation after major corporation after major corporation making billions of dollars in profits, not paying 1 cent in taxes in this country in terms of federal income taxes, because they've set up these phony front groups in the Cayman Islands and in Bermuda where the tax rate is 0. So you're right, and that takes us right to this Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement.
That's what
okay?
I was about to say.
Okay.
That investor-state dispute section pretty much
Right.
says it all.
Right.
We don't give a damn about this country.
Right. And I think clearly, you know, somebody was voted against NAFTA, CAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China. Trust me, I'm going to lead the effort against this Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a continuation of disastrous trade policies. Yeah. Okay, other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
I just wanted to
be loud so they can hear you in the
Sure.
other room.
I just wanted to thank you for coming to New Hampshire to talk to us. You know, a lot of the people who I've been talking to around New Hampshire, I live in Concord, a lot of people are not ready for Hillary and really want a solid progressive candidate who's going to really speak to their values. Now, that being said, as one of those young people who's mired in their Facebook, I can tell you a lot of young people are really aching for a candidate who wants to do 3 things. Demilitarize the police. They want to get rid of the prison industrial complex, and they want debt-free college and a way to make student debt dischargeable through bankruptcy. If you were to stand up and do those things, I think a lot of those young people would really come out and support you.
Well, we're going to do those 3 and many, many more. I would assume that some of them want decent jobs when they leave school too, right?
Yeah.
And some of them are concerned about climate change.
Oh, yeah.
And some of them are concerned about pay equity for women workers. So there's a lot to be done. But I think, in fact, we do have an agenda that speaks to the needs of working people, both college graduates and young people. And it worries me very much, and should worry everybody in this room, that the average kid who's leaving school is $28,000, $29,000 in debt. Some are more. Yeah. Talked to a young woman last year. Her crime was that she wanted to be a primary care physician, treating low-income people. She graduated medical school. That's what she's doing. And you know what the penalty was? $300,000 in student debts. Yeah. All right, we can do a little bit better than that.
Yes.
So I think, and in terms of climate change, I marched a few months ago in New York City with my friend Bill McKibben. Some of you know Bill? Yes. 350.org. There were some 400,000 people, most of them young people.
I was there too.
Oh, you were there too? Okay. I didn't see you. But you were there. Right. But saying that they want a planet which is habitable. So I think we do have a message for young people. Other questions or, yep, so, yes, ma'am. be loud, get the mic back there. Yeah.
Okay. I'm concerned about our corporate-owned media and how we never get any real information on things. And they're more concerned with, stars and gossip and
Yes.
stuff like that.
Very important issue. Is that CNN? They addressed that question to you.
Yeah, right.
Do you hear it? All right.
I'm here.
Okay, that's CNN. All right, no, let me talk about it. Let me talk about it, because it's a very, very important issue. What is your name?
Karen.
Karen. You all hear Karen's question? Yes. And here's the story. And it's a complicated issue, and I don't know exactly what the causation of it is, but here's where you're at. For the media, for a lot, and let me make an exception right away. There's some great stories out there that are analytical and they're extremely intelligent. But by and large, for media, what politics in America today is not radically different than, the Survivor on TV or a game show or a baseball game. It's who's winning and how you win and can Hillary put together the team to win and da-da-da-da. What the real issue is in allowing the American people to engage in a serious discussion, respecting other people's point of view, about serious issues. All right? The United States of America, most of you know, although most Americans probably do not know, is the only nation, major country on earth, that does not guarantee health care to all people. I live in Burlington, Vermont. I'm 100 miles away from Canada. In Canada, all people as a right have health care. UK does, all of Europe does, Scandinavia does. Why is it that the United States is the only country without a national health care program, with 35 million people uninsured, with even more underinsured, and yet we end up spending almost twice as much per person on health care as do the people of any other nation? Is that a good question?
Yeah.
Is that a question that, look, I have my views. I believe in a Medicare for all single payer subsidy.
Yeah.
Yay!
All right, now other people may hold different views. Have you seen that discussion discussed
No.
on television?
No.
Yeah.
Senator Don Sheehan, I come up from the South Shore of Massachusetts. Speaking about the billionaires, look at this. They have money. We have each other. I do a show called Labor Talk. It's on Facebook. I want to get to your kids, their kids, and make the world better. Real quick. Robin Hood tax and the Postal Service. Your thoughts on those two subjects?
Don't get me going. In terms of the Postal Service, you're looking at the guy who's probably done as much as
I know
anybody.
that, sir.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We have fought very, very hard to try to save the United States Postal Service against people who really want to destroy it and privatize it. In one word, the Postal Services will shock everybody if you read newspaper reports. The Postal Service has made in the last several years an operating profit. All right? Not huge. I think it was $1 billion over a couple of years. But they're burdened with something that no other government agency or entity, private company in America is burdened with, and that is coming up with 75 years of future health care retiree benefits in a 10-year period. $5.5 billion every single year is an incredible yoke on their debt. That is the total cost. That is the total reason they are in financial problems. I just had a meeting on Thursday, and my suggestion is we get rid of that $5.5 billion. There's a lot of other things that we have to do, but we've got to save the U.S. Postal Service. It is terribly important for the American people.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And your other point is maybe the most important point. The billionaires do have the money, but we have the people. And as the trade union movement historically has shown, that when people stand together, we can make real change. That's the story of the women's movement, story of the environmental movement, story of civil rights. And what we have got to do is bring our people together, make sure that they do not give up on the political process, and demand that the United States government starts working for ordinary people and not just billionaires.
Many on Wall Street and in Congress are eager to dismantle the Postal Service so they can turn over the profitable pieces to their cronies in private industry. And they are willing to undermine universal service to the American people to make it happen. The American Postal Workers Union isn't taking the assault laying down. The APWU is fighting for a vibrant public postal service for generations to come. More than 60 national organizations have joined forces with the APW to launch a grand alliance to save our public postal service. They all got together on May 14th for a public action.
And what we're fighting for and what you're all fighting for is good postal service. Good postal jobs, good living wage jobs, and a good contract now. So the American Postal Workers Union and all of you are fighting for all of the people of this country, for the best and most vibrant public postal services for generations to come. That's what the people deserve, that's what the people should have, and that's what we're fighting for. And with that, our communities and our country needs good living wage jobs.
As a black woman, most of us are heads of household. And so the postal workers allows us, the post office allows us to be able to have that quality of life for our children. So I just want to say here and just say, I'm here in solidarity. I'm a fighter. I may have on this dress and these heels, but don't get it twisted. We're here to make sure that we're going to fight for our postal service because it belongs to the American people. And I thank you, and God bless you, and thank you.
We're sending a message to PMG Brennan that not only do you have the postal workers to deal with, you have the communities to deal with. You have the citizens to deal with. We're in this together. It takes all of us as we struggle hard to make sure that the vibrant postal service that we have, could have, and should have remains a vibrant postal service.
We have a special service here, and I'm a testimony to that service. Because my parents came to the post office at a very critical time in American history, just as to begin to transfer power, people's power, through the civil rights movement and expand the whole body politics. My parents came to the post office. What did they find at the post office? They found their own vision of themselves as citizens. So we have a grand alliance that involves churches, that involves other unions, that involves all other organizations. We have a grand alliance to talk about saving this national treasure that belongs to us. And remember, it belongs to us. We swept under the rug sometimes, but today we can stand up and say, this belongs to us, and we're going to make sure that it remains in our domain. That's right. Not those who want to privatize it. Not those who want to take it and siphon off the responsibilities. Not those who want to introduce policies that will bring low wages, barely minimum wages to households around the country. The post office represented a beacon for my family. It allowed my people, my mother and father, and us to live a life, to raise a family. And I can remember as I talked today about having breakfast on how many slices of bacon, but the post office on pancakes on Saturday or whatever. The post office made that happen. The little things that you think about. The little things that happened, the post office made it happen when we sat down as a family in that home, knowing that the home belonged to us, knowing that we had a job to go to that was going to allow us to pay for the home that we had invested in and everything. Those are the kind of things that we have to stand up right now at this particular point in time. Because when power concedes nothing except on demand, Frederick Douglass said it. It never will, never has, and never will. So we have to use our power, people power, public power, individual power, collective power to keep this post office sacred, to keep this post office within our domain, and to build a new post office and a new alliance. Thank you.
And now for something completely different.
I'm John Arnold. You may remember me from such scandals as Enron, where I took the Fifth Amendment rather than testify about my energy trades. Then I got an $8 million bonus 2 weeks before the company filed for bankruptcy. Or as one of the youngest billionaires of all time. I've teamed up with the Pew Charitable Trust to talk about a real need. The need to save our public workers from retirement security. Nurses, firefighters, and librarians pay into a pension system their entire lives and expect to get that money back when they retire. Together, we can change this. Call now and we'll pick out a retiree who relies on their pension to pay for things like rent and medications. We'll make sure you never have to hear from them again. Here's how we'll do it. I will pay for Pew's Public Sector Retirement Systems project to drop into their state and issue dire warnings about pensions. We'll use Pew's brand to hype a pensions crisis. Then, I'll spend my fortune to convince state legislators that the only solution to the supposed crisis is to cut pensions. Definitely not by replenishing funds and ending corporate subsidies. Heck, I'll even try to donate massive amounts of money to public television so that they'll put my message on blast. I'm a billionaire, funding a foundation that pays its employees 6 figures for a project designed to steal librarians' pensions. Classic. You can help for just $40 million. You can help dismantle the pension system in your state and help us build a more expensive, less secure plan that profits Wall Street. What are you waiting for? The call is free. Pick up the phone. Call now.
This next clip is Ross Perot in the 1992 presidential debates. He was so right then. Take a look.
Yes, I'd like to direct my question to Mr. Perot. What will you do as president to open foreign markets to fair competition from American business and to stop unfair competition here at home from foreign countries so that we can bring jobs back to the United States?
That's right at the top of my agenda. We've shipped millions of jobs overseas, and we have a strange situation because we have a process in Washington where after you've served for a while, you cash in, become a foreign lobbyist, make $30,000 a month, then take a leave, work on presidential campaigns, make sure you got good contacts, and then go back out. Now, if you just want to get down to brass tacks, first thing you ought to do is get all these folks who've got these one-way trade agreements that we've negotiated over the years and say, fellas, we'll take the same deal we gave you. And they'll gridlock right at that point because, for example, we've got international competitors who simply could not unload their cars off the ships if they had to comply. You see, if it was a two-way street, just couldn't do it. We have got to stop sending jobs overseas. To those of you in the audience who are business people, pretty simple. If you're paying $12, $13, $14 an hour for factory workers, and you can move your factory south of the border, pay $1 an hour for labor, hire a young 25, that's assuming you've been in business for a long time, you've got a mature workforce. Pay $1 an hour for your labor, have no health care, that's the most expensive single element, making a car, have no environmental controls, no pollution controls, and no retirement, and you don't care about anything but making money, there will be a giant sucking sound going south. So if the people send me to Washington, the first thing I'll do is study that 2,000-page agreement and make sure it's a two-way street. One last point here. I decided I was dumb and didn't understand it, so I called a who's who of the folks who've been around it. And I said, why won't everybody go south? They said, we'll be disruptive. I said, for how long? I finally got them up for 12 to 15 years. And I said, well, how does it stop being disruptive? And that is when their jobs come up from $1 an hour to $6 an hour and ours go down to $6 an hour, then it's leveled again. But in the meantime, you've wrecked the country with these kinds of deals. We've got to cut it out.
Mr. President, I come to the floor in support of an amendment I filed with Senators Merkley, Baldwin, and Blumenthal. The amendment is simple. It says that Congress shouldn't make it easy to pass any trade deal that weakens our financial rules. Mr. President, in 2008, we suffered through the worst financial crisis in generations. Millions of families lost their homes. Millions of people lost their jobs. Millions lost their retirement savings. And they watched as the government spent hundreds of billions of their tax dollars to bail out the giant banks. In response, Congress passed some common sense financial reforms, the Dodd-Frank Act. These new rules crack down on the cheating and lying in the financial marketplace. They required the big banks to raise more capital so they wouldn't need a bailout if they started to stumble. And they gave our regulators new tools to oversee the biggest banks to make sure that the rules were followed. Now, it's no surprise that the giant banks don't like the new rules. So for 5 years now, they've been on the attack. They've sent their armies of lobbyists and lawyers and their Republican friends in Congress to try to roll back the rules to let the giants of Wall Street run free again. Democrats have stood strong to fight off these attacks because we knew that thoughtful rules can help stop the next financial crisis and protect our working families from another Great Recession. But now, if this fast-track bill passes, Democrats will be handing Republicans a powerful tool they can use to weaken our financial rules. Here's how it works. This fast-track bill applies to any trade deal presented to Congress in the next 6 years. That's through the end of the Obama presidency, through the entirety of the next presidency, and into the presidency after that. Fast track prevents anyone in Congress from offering any amendments to a trade bill. And in the Senate, with fast track, a trade bill can pass with just 51 votes, not the 60 typically required for major bills. So what if we have a Republican president in 2016 or 2020? Look, I hope that's not the case, but this is a democracy and it's not up to me. Most Republicans, including ones currently running for president, are committed to rolling back financial reforms. With fast track, they could weaken our financial rules in a trade deal and then ram it through Congress with just 51 votes in the Senate. That is a lot easier than the 60 votes needed for a head-on attack on the financial rules through the normal legislative process. Now, this is a real risk. We are already deep into negotiations with the European Union over a massive trade deal. The European negotiators are pressing hard to include financial reforms as part of that trade deal. And lobbyists from the U.S. have recognized that the European trade deal is a great opportunity to weaken America's financial reforms. Here's what a member of the European Parliament said just a few months ago, quote, "I have been approached by lobbyists that have clearly argued they want to have a weak European regulation, much weaker than Dodd-Frank, in order to use that afterwards as a level to undercut or undermine Dodd-Frank in the transatlantic negotiations." The big banks on both sides of the Atlantic are pushing for changes too. A letter from some of the largest financial industry groups in Europe and the United States called for, quote, an ambitious chapter on financial regulations in the European trade deal. I don't think they're looking to make our regulations stronger. Michael Barr, a former senior Obama official at the Treasury Department and one of the architects of Dodd-Frank, said that the risk to Dodd-Frank in a European trade deal is, quote, real and meaningful and worth worrying about. Barr has noted that European officials are, quote, barnstorming the U.S., looking for support to include financial services as part of the talks on the proposed transatlantic trade and investment partnership, while the financial industry looks to use talks to, quote, overturn the pesky and highly effective rules being implemented in the U.S. under the Dodd-Frank Act. Now, the Obama administration, to their credit, has stood strong against such attempts. Treasury Secretary Jack Lew noted in testimony before the House Financial Services Committee that there is, quote, pressure to lower the standards, close quote, on things like financial regulations and trade deals, but that the administration believes that is not, quote, not acceptable. Our lead negotiator, United States Trade Representative Michael Froman, has said that the U.S. is, quote, not open to creating any process designed to reopen, weaken, or undermine implementation of Dodd-Frank. And President Obama's administration says that our trade deals should not include regulation of financial services. I agree. But this president won't be president in 18 months. And there's nothing this president can do to stop the next president from reversing direction in the European negotiations. Senator McConnell certainly knows this. That's why he's telling Republicans, quote, if we want the next Republican president to have a chance to do trade agreements with the rest of the world, this bill is about what that president as well as this one. And that's why I'm proposing this amendment, to make sure that no future president can fast-track a trade agreement that weakens our financial regulations. All of my colleagues who believe in holding the big banks accountable and keeping our financial system safe should support this amendment.